Right. Is this live stream going to work? Yeah, it looks like it. Welcome to the replay, everyone, and welcome to the room, everyone. We're right on time. So I'm going to press record, and we'll get started with questions and answers for Roger. So I'd encourage everyone here, just before I press that, think of any questions you have and start to sort of write them down or think about them, just so that we can sort of hit the ground running after I've said a few things. But obviously, I'll give you the safety warnings during this. All right, so welcome to this question and answer session with Roger Mills. This is the fourth one already. We're more than halfway through the week now. And if this is your first one with Roger, he's an EMDR therapist. He's a psychotherapist and trainer who specializes in working with PTSD. So he's practiced as a therapist for a couple decades and has worked with the UK National Health Service and the Priory Group before focusing exclusively on his private practice. So as well as therapeutic work, Roger's also devised and delivered numerous training programs on trauma-related subjects. And as you've probably heard Mark say in a few sessions, Mark worked with Roger at one point as well. So he recommends Roger highly, and that's why we got him here. So as a few little bits and pieces just before we start as well, please do share these sessions with anyone who you think may benefit. Obviously, the question and answer sessions and the unlimited access is available to those with the All Access Pass. Ooh, as we meant to say. However, anyone can get the sessions if they choose a few chosen ones. We made them very niche, so do share that with people. Replays will be available until the 22nd of September. And if you are interested in the course, there's obviously one with Ilan, which we've got for a super accessible price. It's under $50. And then there's the facilitators courses, which is about post-traumatic growth and developing your superpowers as well. I'll just drop a link there. You can check it out if you're interested. It's also like live group sessions and some of those. And finally, the safety stuff. So is being here right now, are you resourced enough to be here right now? So this is educational and not therapy. So there's no judgment if you're sort of needing one-to-one therapy or something at the moment, but just bear in mind that this isn't a space for that. It's just education, the general questions that try and benefit as many people, and Roger will generally take it in that thing so as not to delve too deeply into something in this moment, because we are in a group space. So if you're not feeling overly resourced right now, if you wouldn't drive a car or something like that, maybe just take a break, have a walk in nature, talk to some loved ones, play with your dog, eat something nice which will help ground you, whatever you need to do. And if something does come up in this session as well, if you become agitated or spaced out or tense or anything like that, please do move, have a shake, make sure you're breathing, and just take care of yourself in those ways. As we say, integrate afterwards, talk to people, do what you need to do to be in your best space. So I think that covers it all. Just take care of yourselves as always, and let's get this started with Roger. Does anyone have any questions that they would like to ask, or anything you want to say, Roger, to invite it?
Not particularly, no. But just keep the questions coming in. If you could post the questions on the chat, then Steve is going to kind of feed me the questions, and we'll take it from there. And good. Well, hello everybody.
And just to sort of give people a little bit of thinking space if they need it for the questions. So since last night, since Patricia's Q&A session last night, there's been stuff on trauma and perfectionism. There's been stuff around anxiety, also trauma and guilt and addiction. And this morning we had some stuff about superpowers and developing those with a post-traumatic growth idea, if there's any questions about how that works. Or also Erica looked at self-doubt and trauma, feeling not good enough. So a lot of different things there that may have come up, or anything earlier in the week, or anything general. So Lisa's actually got one, and I did notice there was something similar to this in Mark's session this morning. So how to manage emotional sensitivity due to guarding and protecting your environment. So she says it's related to chronic pain and prevention from being in pain, so this guarding sense. So the environment needs to feel safe and a need for it to change. So maybe it's something like a sensory overload and the guarding against that. Is there any ways to manage that, Roger?
I think, I mean, within EMDR, there's been some very useful work done on pain, and there is a pain protocol. A guy called Mark Grant, who I think is based in Australia, has done a lot of work on this. I think that one of the things that can be quite helpful to think about in terms of pain is that it's not just the physical pain that is the problem, it's our fighting the physical pain and our not wanting it to be there that is a significant problem. And you can do good work on this by actually focusing on the pain and thinking about the pain in almost as if it was a physical object. What shape is it? How large is it? What color is it? What texture does it have? Is it hot? Is it cold? And so treating the pain as if it is an object, and then having focused on it, there's a technique in EMDR which anybody can try, something called the light stream, which is when you've pictured the pain in a lot of detail, and then you imagine a stream of healing light which is coming down from above your head, enters the top of your head, and then passes through the body until it reaches the pain. And then you imagine the pain little by little dissolving. And many people find this extremely helpful. And that sort of visualization of pain as a physical object, and then imagining something that is coming into you as a healing force. I've certainly done this with a number of clients who have found it quite helpful. Another thing that you can do with pain, and that some people find very very useful, is something called pendulating, and that is you focus on the pain for a few moments, and then you shift your attention to a part of your body where there is no pain, and then you pay attention to that in as mindful a way as you can, and then you shift your attention back to the pain, and then you shift back to the part of the body where there is no pain. So you're deliberately making your attention shift between the source of the pain and somewhere where there is not pain. And this can help reduce the intensity of the pain wherever you are experiencing it.
Thanks, Roger. And I've just wrote there in the chat as well, if anyone does have any questions which are more private, please do private message me, and I'll pass it on to Roger, but I'll read it out, but I'll remain confidentiality. Is Lisa able to unmute to clarify that, Roger?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
All right. Oops, where's she gone?
Yeah. Sorry, just clicking through the technical things on Zoom. Thank you for clarifying that. They're two useful things, and I do things like yoga and meditation things to help the pain, so that sort of feeds into that process, which is really good. But I also see it as like I've done some kind of like first point of pain, looking back to childhood and where I react, and it seems to be like when I swap environments. So if I'm going from like when I was a child at school and then going up to secondary school, or then going to uni or work, every time I swap environment, it seems to manifest emotionally, and there seems to be this guarding. Or if I'm in an environment, been in there a few years, and something changes in that environment, then my body sort of goes into like a sensory overload where it can't cope. And I am working with a therapist, but in my therapy, it seems to be that I do a lot of chatting, and I don't know if this is my first experience of psychotherapy, so I don't know if it's quite normal where the therapist is actually a lot quieter, and she will give guidance and things at times, but it often is me just doing a lot of discussing, really.
I mean, as you may well know, that there are different approaches to therapy. It sounds as if you may be in a your therapist may be a psychodynamic therapist who typically are the type that will say less and allow you to talk more. I mean, it seems to me that Lisa, it would be very helpful for you to really explore what those transitions mean for you. Because it seems, when you've got a situation where you can identify this is happening at this particular point, whenever I go through a significant change, whether it be shifting schools or something happens in an environment that has been stable for a long time and then there's a change, that's when I get this acute sensitivity. So that's actually very useful in a way, because it's telling you that is a trigger for you. There is something about those changes which is causing that physical response in you. So I would want to then be digging into those changes. When was the first big change that you remember, and what was it about? What was it about them? What do you feel when you think about those big changes? Also, important question: when you think about change, what is your belief about yourself? It might be, and I have no idea if this is right, Lisa, but suppose it was something like, I can't handle this. This is too much for me. This is overwhelming. That, if that is something that you experience when you face a change, that's telling you that actually change is, in a way, it's a small t trauma for you. Okay, so it would be then important, I think, to look at the first big change that you dealt with and try and do some work on that, because usually things, root back to our first traumatic experiences of them, if you see what I mean. Oh, you've been muted again, Lisa. Hang on.
Yeah, it's okay. I'm unmuted now. That's fantastic. That definitely gives me some things to think about, Roger. Appreciate that.
It's a pleasure.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Lisa and Roger.
Yeah, thank you.
We've also got a question in the chat there. So how can I move beyond being silenced in my own voice when I start thinking or wanting to talk about tough things?
Okay. Well, in a way, you could. There's perhaps a sort of parallel to what I was saying with Lisa, because when you want to talk about tough things, that is obviously also a trigger situation for you. I don't know who gave a question. I should be mentioning somebody's name, I think.
We've got Ilyana. I know she's early morning in New York, so she might be in the dark.
Oh, okay, Ilyana, yeah. Where does this come from? That's an important question to ask yourself. It sounds as if, in some way or other, talking about tough things, and I don't know what kind of tough things we're talking about. Are they, it may be particular types of subject which are difficult for you, but something is going on there that makes you, if I've understood this correctly, makes you sort of mute yourself, as it were, makes you silence yourself. Now, that may be because, hang on, I can see there's something from Ilyana. Let me just... Yes, well, Ilyana said in the chat, probably my voice not being powerful enough when I was younger to overcome an abusive situation. That sounds very likely. It sounds as if, the situation that you were in, there was no possibility of you making yourself heard, and so you have a belief, I can't talk in this sort of situation. And again, it's important for you, I think, to do, and you may well have embarked on this or done some work on this already, but clearly the abusive situation that you experienced when you were younger was a traumatic one, and it's going to be very important to work through that, so that it's no longer sort of affecting you in terms of how you experience your life and how you behave now. Yesterday I was talking about how one of the huge problems with trauma is that traumatic memories are alive in us, and so the early experiences that you're describing, Ileana, were, they unfortunately sound as if they're not memories that you have managed to say, right, that's in the past, that's finished, that's over. It doesn't have to affect me in the present. And traumatic memories remain alive in us until we actually do successful therapeutic work on them and allow ourselves to process them. So I think, and these can have very powerful physical effects. You mentioned my throat dries up. That's actually part of the fight or flight response. The digestion shuts down, and so our throats sometimes go dry. And so, the message there, in terms of what can you do about this, I think it suggests to me that some really useful therapeutic input would be the road to go down.
Thanks, Roger. And I noticed as well something perhaps slightly related, but Ileana did also write there. Do you think it is possible to move forward without having to go deeply into the past, like whether there's things there or it's always going there as well?
I suppose it might be. I mean, I suppose it might be possible to try something like a sort of graded exposure approach to things. Now, what I mean by that is that you try to build up your capacity to do the thing that is difficult to do by starting with a moderately stressful situation and trying to practice talking in that situation, and then gradually building up to more challenging situations. So you're building up a capacity to face the difficult thing, in this case, to be able to talk, by starting on something that's relatively easy, and then moving to more difficult things. It's a sort of step-by-step approach. That could be useful too. So that's a sort of behavioural approach to tackling something that is at the moment difficult.
Great, thank you. And did anyone? I remember a question from the chat this morning, so I could bring that up. But did anyone have any other questions? Feel free to type them in the chat. Otherwise, I know there was a question this morning, which I've seen a few times come up actually, around people talking about being very sensitive, but lacking the ability to regulate in a particular situation. Somewhat related to the first one here, but do you have any suggestions to help people around regulation when they can become oversensitive in situations?
I think that one of the things that you can do is to actually, well, a number of things you can do. Breathing exercises can be quite helpful, and breathing exercises are obviously that's a way of calming the body down. Our breath is one of the parts of our sort of physical responses that we have conscious control of. If you practice breathing exercises, you can actually then use breathing exercises during a stressful situation. So that's one way of regulating difficult emotions. I think another thing that can be very useful is to anticipate a situation and role play it in your mind, or role play it with somebody else. And the more that you can do that, the easier a situation is likely to become. So you can use one of the therapeutic techniques in EMDR is a tapping technique where we tap alternately on your shoulders like that, and that can be very helpful when you're kind of anticipating a situation that's going to be stressful. Imagine what that's going to be like. Imagine it in as much detail as you possibly can. Think of it as if it's happening in the present tense, and then imagine yourself successfully dealing with it. And even if emotions come up, you're managing to contain those emotions successfully. And the more that you role play that in your own mind, or indeed, as I said, with somebody else, the better prepared you will be for the challenging situations when they come up. It's really helpful to identify the sorts of situations where that emotional overload is likely to happen, because those are going to be your trigger situations, and those are the ones to work on. And yeah, so kind of knowing your triggers is a really important part, I think, of dealing with trauma. And you can prepare yourself for them to some extent. Obviously, some triggers will be easier than others, and sometimes you may find things where, despite your preparation, you do feel a bit overloaded. But it's important to remember that how you think about those setbacks is crucial. Important to think of those as a blip rather than as I'm back to square one. And the more work you can do on preparing yourself for difficult situations, the trigger situations, the better.
Thanks, Roger. There was another question above around.
Can I just seen something from Liana for tapping? No matter how lightly it physically hurts and is super uncomfortable, it's just not for me. Would it be the same, Liana? Some people can do this by tapping their toes. You can do it with the lightest possible touch. You can just do it with a finger tapping alternately, very lightly, like that. The point about tapping is it's what's called bilateral stimulation. You're stimulating one side of the brain, then the other, left and right. And you need an alternating movement for that. You can do it with your hands like this. EMDR got its name from eye movements, and therapists will move their hands like that and ask the client to track their hands with their eyes. That's quite difficult to do on your own, of course, although you can buy light bars where you track a light, so you get the eye movement that way. But the essence of tapping is, as I say, it's the bilateral stimulation, and it can be very, very light. It doesn't have to be, that was obviously quite physical. It doesn't have to be like that. Okay, great. Sorry, Steve, you were saying.
There was a question around grief a little bit earlier as well. So what happens when, and I just want to remind everyone as well, during any of this, if you ever feel like a little bit spaced out or tense or something, do something to resource yourself. But if the normal way of grief doesn't feel available, so like grief and trauma, like related to the death of a child or something, and not feeling able to grieve, do you have any suggestions?
Yes, I think that I think that writing a journal is enormously helpful, and or writing the story of the loss. I think that is something that can unblock repressed grief. I'm well aware that one of the ways in which we can cope with grief is that we block it, and this isn't a conscious choice. It's something that happens unconsciously. Our mind doesn't want to let us go there. It's important to remember that grief will often unblock over time. So in the early stages of grief, people may report feeling a sort of, it doesn't feel real to me. But that as time goes by, they're able to access that grief more easily. Sometimes people are able to access their feelings by reading something, seeing a movie that connects them to it. So sometimes by witnessing grief in someone else, that allows us to unblock our own grief. It was I was really struck back in, what was it, 97, when Lady Diana died. I was living in London at the time, and I went down to Hyde Park and watched the funeral procession go by. And there was an incredible outpouring of emotion. It was absolutely extraordinary. And I kept thinking, I can't believe that these people really have such intense feelings about Diana, it seemed to be they were all actually able to access feelings of their own that had probably been blocked through connecting with her in one way or another. And so that's just to come back to this point of, a way of unblocking grief can be through stories, through movies, through something that offers a parallel to the experience that you've been having.
Thank you, Roger. And another one that's slightly related, I think this will be the final question. Do you have any simple starter exercises to physically release grief and loss? So someone's saying they find themselves feeling like they have kind of stuck energy. Any physical move feels like they're faking it. They don't really feel like they're sort of accessing that.
I don't know about that. Although I would have thought that some of the some of the embodiment practices would be quite helpful there, and likewise yoga. I mean, anything that allows the body to physically relax is, I think, likely to allow the mind to relax at the same time. Repression of emotions often involve, people talk about themselves as being all clenched and tight and so on. So anything, where you allow yourself to physically unclench, I think might be helpful.
I'm wondering if we can just answer this final sentence of this one that's just been dropped in, and then we can let you go, Roger. But talking about traumatic experience in the summer with a visit from a friend. So someone with bipolar disorder and behaved irrationally. So she found herself in freeze modes, walking on eggshells. How can someone practice self-care in the aftermath of something like that?
Well, a lot of great self-care can be done with really just the basics. So things like exercise, things like eating well, spending time with people that you love and trust and with whom you feel completely comfortable, making sure that you get a lot of rest, doing things that you love, doing things that you find completely absorbing. None of this stuff is rocket science at all, of course, but the basic stuff can be enormously helpful for us. I think having a sort of routine for ourselves as well, and making sure that we do the things that are going to be healthy and helpful is important. It's incredibly easy for routines to slide. You do a few days and you start to feel a bit better, and then you forget about it. I'm as bad at that as anybody, but being quite sort of disciplined with yourself and making sure that you're doing all the useful stuff is really helpful. And remember, the effect of these things is cumulative. It's not the model to think of is not a headache model where you take a tablet and the headache goes away. It's a gym model where you have to go a number of times a week, otherwise basically your fitness disappears. So think of it in those terms.
Thank you, Roger. And I know that you've got to get going right now, so I just want to say to everyone, like, that's some nice advice that we've been saying after every session. So if you are binge watching sessions, or if you've having stuff come up or anything like that, do come back to that stuff. As Roger says, it's simple maybe, but it's not easy. Like, we sort of know it, we don't necessarily do it. So anything there that you want to close on, Roger, before I do the little wrap up?
No, I mean, there are more questions coming up that if we have the opportunity to pick them up tomorrow, that would be great. There was one about solo EMDR. Does the chat disappear when the recording?
I'll email them to you so we both have it, so then we can.
That would be great, because time's too tight as ever, but there are some things that we can pick up on tomorrow.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we'll come back to those tomorrow. So if you can't be there, then we'll have the replay obviously as well. So thank you, Roger. Thank you everyone for being here. As usual, take care of yourself after this, doing that stuff that was just mentioned just then. So hang out with friends, go for a walk in nature, speak to loved ones, eat well, get some rest, move a bit, all these sorts of things. If you do want to share this, please do share it. People will benefit from all of these sessions, whether it's the Q&As and people get live pass, whether it's just some of the free sessions that people can choose. We want as many people to get as possible, and obviously after next week it won't be available, so that people regret not getting it. And if you want to check out any of the courses, there's Ilan's course, which is about movement, really. There's shaking and various things, and she offers some very cool reframes on it. I was doing it on Tuesday night, actually. I was going through her course. So if you want to check that out, or you want to check out the superpower section of that on post-traumatic growth and how you can, from the healing, you can then grow in new different ways from the skills that may have been learned, you can check that out. Obviously replays there as well. Email Agatha if you would like to do so. And finally, I'll just do a quick little share on what's coming up the rest of today. So obviously there's the other Q&A session there tonight as well with Patricia. So that's at 6 p.m. UK time, which is 1 p.m. Eastern time. Well, that's Wednesday, Thursday. It looks the same anyway. It still says Q&A. Coming up next is Ilan, how people who annoy you reflect their own trauma. So that's a little bit around maybe some shadow stuff. Ron's looking at resilience and an interesting reframe, how to bend, not break. There's a session in German coming up that Ilan's doing. Obviously, Erica's back, she mentioned before, and that's on self-care. And that's with Patricia as well, who's obviously a therapist. So if you'd like to go more into that, you can attend that as well. Stuff around meditation, unleashing your creativity, so superpower stuff. Paul's absolutely great on what Roger mentioned there about step-by-step calibration to practice coming out of things. That's Paul's whole philosophy in the trauma therapy he does with people as well. You've got Mark talking about leadership. Christina's really awesome as well. She's great. So a lot of good stuff coming up. And yeah, so I hope you benefit. I hope you share. I hope you got something from this session. And thank you, Roger, for being here. If you want to say anything to close, feel free to do so. Otherwise, we'll wrap things up.
No, well, just to say, great to see everybody, and hope to see you tomorrow.
Cheers. Thank you all. Roger's got 2 more sessions at this time, so see everyone.
Okay.